Bengals NFL Top 100 plus Joe Burrow's new deep ball and a special guest coming up next on the Wincinnati podcast.
Yes. Hello, world. We got a special show as always. TJ Houshmandzada, Jimmy Chase, Coach Jimmy Burrow.
Exciting time to be a Bengals
How do
fan.
you balance being a professional athlete and family obligation? These are top 5 Bengals of all time.
All time? Yeah. Shock the world.
Welcome to the Wincinnati podcast. I'm your host, Ace Boogie. He is your co-host, Zim. Zim, what's going on, bro?
Nothing much, man. Rocking out here in the free world. Shout out to Nardwar. That's our guy. But aside from that, just out here, living my life, trying to get better every single day, fresh off the holiday. Had a really good holiday. I absolutely destroyed the grill, gave him the lobster tails on the grill, the corn on the cob. I gave him, somebody else did the beans. I gave him the work. So I'm fresh off of that epic performance at the grill, doing my thing. What's up with you? How was your holiday, my friend?
It was great, bro. Got to spend some time with the fam. Got to see some dolphins. Got to see some flamingos. Fed some flamingos and stuff like that. So it was dope. And hope everybody who's listening, hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend. Hope you had as good of a time as me and Zim did, whether it was chilling on that grill or doing your thing. We dropped some new shows today. If you are listening in the car, you probably heard of our 2 new podcasts. We got the 513 with our man Eric. We also have the new Wincy from our man Garrett. So please be sure to check those out. And if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please be sure to hit that subscribe button because we are coming full force several days throughout the week. So be sure to tap in because we have a lot of shows for you guys. And we've got another great show lined up for you guys tonight for the Wincinnati podcast. We have AllBengals writer Elise Jesse joins us to talk about the Bengals offseason workouts and how the offensive line is coming together. So you'll want to stick around for that. And speaking of OTAs, the deep ball was on full display on Tuesday. So we'll talk about our Burrow and the Bengals getting ready to unleash an even deadlier long-range attack in 2022. And with us just being 100 days away from the NFL kickoff, we'll discuss how many Bengals we think will be in the NFL's top 100. All that and more coming up next on the Wincinnati Pod. Let's get it.
Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go!
All right, Zim. Joe Burrow has been teeing up this deep ball at offseason work today. Do you think that the passing game for the Bengals takes that next step now that they have an offensive line?
I do. I always tell people too, kind of have a little bit of pause on like how fast it, you allow these guys to get familiar with some of the play calling and some of the stuff moving forward. But at some point in the season, it's going to be hell on earth for teams. Like I'm hoping in the main stretch when we need it the most, but there's going to be some epic football to be played this season. And the offense, I think, is going to take the next step forward. And I just watching the guys at practice, just looking at them on all cylinders earlier. Like I did get kind of excited. I told you this one time before. Anytime I see Lyle out there, it's just different, bro. Like, I don't know, like maybe I just haven't seen like this dominant, offensive lineman like out there in a long time, but it does just look different, and my confidence levels for the team just go even higher. So I believe these guys can achieve anything they set out to do.
No, you're right. I mean, when was the last time that we've been excited to look at the offensive line, right? You talk about LC being there. He's a big part of this offensive line, which we'll get into later with our interview. But I think you're right. When you talk about the Bengals passing game, even though they were electric with the deep ball last season, I believe Joe Burrow had about 12 or so touchdowns where they were considered deep touchdown passes just last year, which was a crazy record. If you look at the last 2 years, Joe Burrow had it in one season. It's crazy to imagine that this passing game can go to a whole other level because now they have an offensive line. So a lot of people are discounting them with talking about the 50-50 balls and that they won't be so lucky. But what people aren't realizing is now you're going to be able to allow receivers to do those double moves, allow them to have those routes develop, and allow them to torch secondary. So I think that there is actually, as crazy as it sounds, another level that they can tap into. So it's good to see them working on that. But shifting gears here, Hayden Hurst was interviewed and he said, I quote, "You look to your left, you look to your right, and you see all pro potential guys." And we want to talk about how that would actually free up Hayden Hurst to make plays on mismatches. Me personally, I was a huge fan of them signing this guy, knowing that he has that Dallas Clark route running ability. I think that he's going to be an upgrade from what CJ Uzomah brought in. And I think that he's going to be a huge benefactor, and Joe Burrow is going to be a huge benefactor of having him across the middle to create some of those mismatches, especially when guys are going to be paying attention to the Migos. I feel like I've spoken to this ad nauseum, but I think that Hayden Hurst is just in for an explosive year. Zim, what are your thoughts on how those all-pro potential guys will free up Hayden Hurst?
For sure. I feel like Hayden Hurst could be the missing link to this whole mastermind plan of, the Bengals taking this next step forward this upcoming season. So the Hayden Hurst, I don't use the word worried, but I pump my brakes a little bit because I do want to see Hayden Hurst put it all together and do his thing like consistently, like week after week in the NFL. And that's the bigger thing. Like as far as what he brings to the Bengals, clearly a step up from the CJ Uzomah. You might lose a little bit from blocking, but I think you're now able to open up the playbook where now the tight end's not in line so much and you can pull them away from the line because now the offensive line is upgraded. So I don't think that'll hurt them. I think that when it's time to go get those extra yards, they'll probably just go heavy, bring in those Isaiah Prince or somebody like that. And like those packages, if they got to go get like 1 yard, but like the short down stuff, we're going to see like how they're going to use them. That's one thing I worry about. But Hayden Hurst's effectiveness in the offense, as long as he's out there, people are going to be in for a rude awakening on like I was just looking at the Titans game. I watched the replay because I pulled up old tweets from the Titans game. They were really healthy. Their fans let us know that. If you guys want a good laugh, I retweeted some of those tweets before the game. But in that game, CJ Uzomah had 7 catches and I think for about 71 yards, and he really was a difference maker in a lot of those drives when times got really, really, really tough. So Joe will find you. That's the key. People ask me that every day. They be like, "Well, what about T. Higgins? He gonna take it?" I'm like, I don't know. All I know is Joe. Whoever open, Joe gonna find him. Period.
Facts. Well, speaking of Zim, we have a new sponsor that we want to talk about that we are happy to be working with here on the Wincinnati podcast. So I'll let you take that away, sir.
Right. So big announcement. We have a new affiliate that we're working with. My boy, Dr. Pierce, best dentist in the area. He's worked with a lot of your favorite Bengals players. I'm hoping to get some work done with him soon, so I can't vouch with my smile thus yet. But they have an office that's downtown for 80 years. It's a new one that's built in 2015, but it's located at 425 Walnut Street, Suite 201, Fountain Square, Cincinnati, Ohio. Confidence starts here. Go where the pros go. Go next level. Your smile is your brand. So go to Dr. Pierce. I'm gonna be rolling out some cool graphics for those guys, and he does some real good stuff on Instagram and stuff too. So make sure you stay in tune with that. But if you notice that the Bengals have all brand new smiles on the whole entire roster, it's because of our guys over at Pierce Dental Group.
Facts. So without further ado, we're gonna get into our interview with Elise Jesse coming up next on the Wincinnati podcast. And we have a special guest today with us, Elise Jesse. Elise, what's going on today?
Hey guys, how are you?
Pretty good. Zim, do you want to kick us off with our interview?
Sure. I feel like we got a special edition here. We're going to be live from Elise Jesse's car, and she's going to sing karaoke the whole entire way through. Just joking. Even though I know
I'll sing.
We might have to put some of I might have to at some point in this, we're going to have to get you to cut the radio on, and we're going to have to do a sing along at some point. But before we get there, you're just leaving Bengals practice. you have any observations? Today is the 31st of May. Any observations, anything that stands out to you that you just can't hold in anymore?
You know how OTAs are. I mean, it's basically a glorified walkthrough, in my opinion. They have no pads on. They're just running, throwing the ball. I mean, it looks like they're having fun out there like you and I would at a backyard barbecue or something. But what did stand out to me was inside the locker room, because Joe Burrow has Andy Dalton's old locker. And so you notice little things about what guys like to keep in their locker. Some like pre-workout, some guys like protein shakes or waters, whatever. Joe Burrow has this little cart next to his locker, and it's got like a $20 microwave on it. And I walk in, I'm like, what is that? What's that for? And no one knew. So I walked up to Joe and I'm like, what are you doing? Are you microwaving Hot Pockets in here? What is this for? And then he explained that he heats up his lunch every day. And it started because the cafeteria was closed at Paul Brown Stadium during COVID. And so he's never had a cafeteria until this year. So he's had his private chef drop off meals. And he showed me what he was eating today. It was like kimchi, something super, super healthy, which makes sense because he's been putting on a lot of muscle mass. But yeah, he said any of his teammates can use the microwave. It's an interesting little feature. You don't usually see little microwaves next to guys' lockers.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting for sure. It seems like he's on the Jordan Rules plan of putting on some muscle and some more weight this season. At least, obviously, like you said, with COVID, you guys weren't able to get into the locker room. But are there any differences that you've been able to pick up between last year's team and this year's team? I know it's early, but have you seen any differences there?
Well, I mean, during this time of the year, most guys are usually in a good mood. They're not in the grind of the season. Their bodies aren't hurting them right now. So usually guys are in pretty lifted spirits. And especially coming off a Super Bowl run, of course, they're going to be in really great moods. But yeah, this is kind of how this time of year always is. I think the biggest thing or the biggest difference that we could notice is once the season starts, because that's when their bodies start to hurt and they're a little bit more tired. And so it kind of changes moods within the locker room, especially if a guy's not performing how he wants to. You'll definitely see changes like that. But right now, I mean, everyone seems like they're having a great time. Everyone seems like they're getting along. And the locker room seems like a place with good vibes. So that's a good thing to me.
Confirm. Elise Jesse cannot drive. She just hit something and it was nothing. Like, that's how you know when somebody's crazy is on or what. They start driving and hit something and didn't even flinch. I'm jumping on my side of the camera. Back to this microwave. I think a great idea. Next time you go to the locker room, bring something to warm up and just let's test out Joe and see if you're able to use the microwave.
See if he's as good at sharing as he claims he is.
That would I just want to see his response. I just think that would be gold. One of the things that came out of camp today was that Alex Kappa had returned. Yeah. I know a lot of people were scared about that. Did you observe anything from him on the field?
He didn't do work, obviously, but the fact that he was there with his teammates and wanted to be there, he was in a really great spirits, smiling, joking around with his fellow linemen and Frank Pollock. He seems like he feels good. He probably doesn't totally feel good, but that's the look that he's giving off. And honestly, he's got a few months before the season starts, so I would rather him get that kind of injury right now and have him have time to get his body right rather than just a few weeks ahead of the season.
Sure, for sure. Now, everybody was buzzing about the Joe Burrow interview, something that he doesn't do too often, right, with the podcast and stuff like that. What were your thoughts on just the interview in general and things that you were able to pull out of it?
So going in, last week was the first time that I was able to meet Joe Burrow when he was not on a podium. And he is able to turn on the character on the podium. So I'm thinking, I don't know what kind of personality I'm going to get. Some guys have really great vivacious personalities with the lights on them, and others are more reserved. So I introduced myself to him last week, and I thought that he was really down to earth. super cool, very kind, just a normal, everyday kind of guy. And then in that interview, it was kind of the same. I felt like he was just, hanging out with the guys on the podcast and enjoying himself and answering questions as best he could. I'm personally shocked that he did that podcast. I believe he said that he was bored, which was the reason why he did it. But I'm shocked that he did that, because I asked him last week if it was weird for him to have, media come into the locker room. There's about 20 of us, I would say. And last year he didn't experience that, or the year prior. So he's just now getting the full feel of what it's like to be in the NFL with the media seeing almost everything that you do, and having them, I guess, invade their space, which is the locker room. And he said it was pretty weird to have media in there, which I expected. But that's just something that he'll get used to down the road.
I think one of my favorite interviews was Joe Burrow right after the national championship. And me and Ace talk about this often, though. And that was the first time, and you don't get those type of interviews from him. He was a little bit inebriated in that interview. I don't know if people have ever seen that one. I think that was Barstool's, wasn't it, Ace?
I believe so.
Okay, so in that interview was the first time I think that we kind of got like a little, like some of the cockiness, some of the, not the podium cockiness, like the chilling with the guys cockiness or whatever.
Yeah.
Was your takeaway? Some people that I talked to about it, they thought that it came across as like he was maybe a little bit arrogant in that one. Did you feel that way in that interview?
I don't see arrogance from him. It's how do I put my finger on it? It's like the it guy. I don't know how else to describe it other than saying that Joe Burrow gives off the it guy kind of vibe. And I didn't think that he was arrogant personally one-on-one at all. I thought that he, as down to earth as they come, in my opinion.
Definitely, for sure. One other guy that everybody wanted to meet was Jamar Chase. Have you had a chance to bump into him yet? And if so, what are your impressions from Jamar Chase?
I have heard so much about Jamar Chase, and I have not had a chance to talk to him yet because I've basically been stalking the offensive line and Frank Pollock. Frank's hilarious because I think he was still coaching his offensive line like 15 minutes out in the sweltering heat after everybody else had already gone inside. And usually by that time, most of the guys have come in and showered, done all their stuff, and left and gone to go eat their lunch. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to introduce myself to Jamar Chase pretty soon.
I don't know if him and Tyler Boyd and the guys, they were fresh off of Vegas. I don't know what time they got back, but they represented really well from the for the Bengals. I saw them at the club and different things like that, Bengals signs up and all that. Did you notice? I know you said at the beginning of this that guys were like having fun, different things. I saw that Von Bell missed his flight, or something happened with his flight or whatever. Oh, no. I don't know if you noticed he wasn't there. But from the guys straight from Vegas, just your observations of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and the big weapons that everybody likes to talk about. Do they look bigger? Do they look stronger? Do they look faster? Do you see anything that maybe we're not seeing at home?
Tyler Boyd looks like he has put in a lot of work so far in the offseason, which was rather short. T. Higgins, the only thing I noticed about him, he seemed like he was not dressed like everybody else, and he seemed like he was more off to the side today. Maybe, I don't know if it's a rest day or something like that for him, but what I noticed
the shoulder
was that he had a homemade hat. Like he took a towel and wrapped it and made like a little turban type thing around his head.
You got to put water on it first. You got to put cold water, dip it in the water, then you tie it up like that. That's how that's done.
I am so impressed with how innovative that was. I'm like, look at this guy. He doesn't need a hat. He looks like he's super comfortable with his homemade hat. It's great. T's just funny. Like I've talked to T's trainer out in Arizona, so I've gotten little glimpses of T's personality from a different perspective. And I noticed it a little bit today, like when a really good song would come on, because they blast players' music during practices and stuff. You would notice him start to jive a little bit. And I was waiting for him to really bust out with the moves, but he never did. But he was just doing like quiet ones, so it wouldn't be distracting. But you could tell that he couldn't help himself when music came on. He couldn't help himself not dance.
Oh, that happens to you often, I bet too, right?
Oh, I dance all the time. Come on now.
Right.
But you talked about offensive line earlier, that you've been kind of stalking them. What have you noticed that has really stood out from the offensive line from that standpoint?
It seems like the guys on this offensive line are a lot more comfortable and more at ease. And I was talking to Frank Pollock this afternoon. We walked from the practice field to the locker room together today. And I was just asking him because I've been covering him for a while because he first came in 4 or 5 years ago under Marvin Lewis. So I already know that 70 sacks in their quarterback is not up to his standards. If you look at a player, super talented offensive lineman, it doesn't matter how much talent he has if he doesn't know where he's supposed to be or what he's supposed to do when a certain play is called.
It seems like Frank Pollock is essentially incorporating the new offensive lineman into the new offense, translating all of that stuff to them to help them understand the Bengals offense, correct?
Yeah, because when you think about it, every coach has a different philosophy, a different system that they like to run, and they use different verbiage. So LC had different verbiage when he was, and now he is trying to translate that now in Cincinnati, and Frank Pollock is helping him with that. Frank mentioned that was the biggest issue, was making sure that everyone was clear on what the translation was as far as play calling and the verbiage used with the play calling, which is so important because if you have an incredibly talented offensive lineman and he doesn't know where he needs to be on the field or what he needs to do on a certain play, it's not going to matter. So understanding what is needed of them is huge. And I also thought that it's going to be a big change for the Bengals offensive line going into 2022 because, it seems to me that the vibe that I get from Coach Pollock and Lael Collins is that they have a lot of trust in each other. And I think that another player in the offensive lineman room, if he didn't understand something that Pollock was talking about, LC would be able to translate for him. And that would just help that player play better because when you know exactly what's expected of you on the field, you play faster, you trust what's going on that play, and it makes a world of difference.
Does it seem like LC is kind of becoming the leader of that offensive line?
Yeah, big time, real quick. He's got that chill vibe about him, but he's super, super nice. I really enjoyed my conversation with him last week. But I think when a guy is able to explain things to younger guys or other guys who might not understand what the coach is talking about, I think when he's able to go in and kind of make sure that everybody is on the same page and everybody understands what's expected of them, I think that a lot of people, especially offensive linemen, will take to that. And it seems like the offensive linemen as a whole, like the group of them is really close. It seems like they get along really well, which is a good sign.
And I do want to point this out. This is the first time that Elise has come back to our show since I wiped the floor clean with her and Ace here when they were on Team Panay Sewell. So I think it's very fitting.
That was the second one? That was the second one?
Waiting for you to bring that.
The second one I lost. The second one. All right, the second one I lost. But I do think that we do need to point out the fact that Elise is a big proponent of offensive line play. I do want to go to the defensive side of the ball. Let's talk about Jesse Bates really quick. Do you think that his presence, him not being there, is felt at practice or in the locker room?
I think it is felt, but I think that the players understand. Jesse's not going to put his body on the line because for OTAs, in my opinion, they're still trying to work out a deal. He's still hoping that he gets a deal that, in his eyes, is a respectful one. Here's the thing, with so many Bengals, every single piece of talent that they have on their roster. And there have been players in the past who are extremely talented who wanted to stay in Cincinnati. And when they got the offer, they felt like they were disrespected. And that's why they left or why they signed with other teams, because those other teams showed their interest and their value with their dollars. If Jesse didn't feel like he was getting a deal that was respectful to him and his value and how he plays, then I wouldn't be shocked if he said, no, I'm going to go somewhere else, because at the end of the day, it's a business for the NFL. NFL teams, but it's also a business for the players. I mean, you only have so much time in the NFL. You've got to try to earn as much money and as much guaranteed money as you possibly can before. You never know when an injury is going to come. You never know how long your playing career is actually going to last. Andrew Whitworth's career lasted, 11 years or something like that? That is not the norm. Usually it's about, 3 or 4. So I don't blame a guy for saying, you know what, this team's going to give me 5-6 million more. I'm going to go that way. I think anybody in their right mind would.
But that's not the question really kind of being posed, I guess, in this particular instance, right? Right now, Jesse Bates potentially could hold out.
You could.
Moving next year, like that's a whole different story. Do you think let me rephrase this then. Do you think he plays on the tag? Considering what you just said about the amount of money he's made in his whole entire career, leaving $13 million on the line.
I haven't been able to speak with Bates. I believe he's been home in Indiana, but I haven't been able to speak with him about where his head's at with this. He very well could play on the tag, and hope that, in that instance, if he's playing on the tag, he's betting completely on himself and he's risking injury, right? So by playing on the tag, you're saying, I know how good I am, and I know that even by playing in 2022 and risking my body, I know that I'm good enough to get an even bigger deal the next year. I wouldn't be surprised if he did bet on himself. That would not surprise me at all. And also, I think that it would be beneficial for him to stay within the Bengals organization as far as understanding plays and stuff and what's expected of him. I know that he is one of the few players during the transition from Marvin Lewis to Zach Taylor. Jesse Bates is one of the few players who really understood what Lou Anarumo was asking from him. And I think that goes a long way because, again, it goes down to translation, understanding what's expected of you, and making sure that you trust the coach enough to put you in a good position to succeed. And so far, he's been put in a pretty good position to succeed.
Essentially, the Bengals, even though they haven't given too much guaranteed money, they typically have honored like the length of those contracts. They don't typically cut players early. Seeing that with Pac-Man Jones and Leon Hall, is there any of that that's also at play with like Jesse Bates or other free agents, or do they just typically just see the guaranteed money and take it at face value?
You know what? I'm not completely clear on what the Bengals or how much money the Bengals would have to move in order to give Jesse Bates exactly what he wants. Because when you look at this roster, it's the most talented roster I think I've seen with the Cincinnati Bengals attached to it in a long time, since I've been covering the team for almost a decade. And that's a lot of talent, but it's a lot of dollars to keep that talent. And I don't know how much of it they can keep. I don't know. I think we got to see how it all plays out. Obviously, the guys in the front office, Duke Tobin, they're probably crunching the numbers and trying to figure out how they could keep Jesse. But you know, if Jesse feels like that number is disrespectful, I would think that he would walk, like everybody else.
Right. Yeah. And just so you know, like I kind of preach that same argument or the same points that you've been saying about Jesse Bates. Like, this is super risky for him to play on the tag. You wouldn't go to your boss and say, hey, I want to get paid less than everybody else because I'm doing it for the team. Like, I want to get my value. So we're on the same page with that. I do want to swing to another hard-hitting one, I think. Earlier in the locker room, the Jackson Carman question finally came up. I think I know that you all had access to him last week. I don't know who asked the question, but can you give us an idea or like kind of paint the scene for the Jackson Carman, like off the field controversial stuff that was asked to him today?
So I was walking in with Frank Pollock, and when I walked into the locker room, the first question I asked was, did everybody address the Jackson Carman situation? And my colleague, James Rapine, said, yes, it was asked. And as everyone expected, he said there was no comment. I know there weren't any charges filed. I know Zach Taylor also said no comment around the draft. So what everyone would expect came from that situation today.
Okay.
I know that a lot of reporters were disappointed last week when it was not asked. I was too busy interviewing LC to even talk to Carmen last week. But I do think that it's our responsibility, obviously, to ask the question. So it had to be asked, even though it's uncomfortable and even though it has nothing to do with football, you still got to ask the question. That's the hard part about being a reporter.
You're right.
Got to ask the tough questions for sure.
Yep. That's why we're asking you the tough questions today.
So another tough question for you, because these guys are still in shorts right now. But have any of the rookies that you've seen in the locker room or just on the practice field stood out to you?
No.
All right.
I'm kidding. It's my second time there. I was talking to James about this because before last week, that was my first time in the locker room or around the team in person since 2020. And back in those years, I mean, you're around the team so much, you know a guy just how they walk or just their body language. You know exactly who that is. And so now I'm just paying attention to guys, looking at their numbers and making sure that I'm able to line that up. So if I see them down the road, it just makes my job faster for whatever reason. I think that's the case. I'm really just kind of getting their body language down, and I'm trying to see, how they interact with their teammates, because to me right now, what they're doing on the field doesn't mean jack.
No, for sure. No,
I can't argue with you.
You said something that was telling there though. You said you have to look at the numbers, not you personally, but has any media member ever went up to the wrong person expecting that they were a star player and, started interviewing them and realized hey, this isn't this guy because that I think that it was?
Luckily, that's never happened to me. I am very fortunate that has never happened. I haven't seen too much of that. I have seen, back when Pac-Man Jones was in the locker room, if someone wrote a scathing article about him, he would call you right out. He was not afraid to go head to head with you ever. So I've seen little tips like that within the locker room, but it's never been the case where someone completely did not know who the person was, as far as I've seen.
Moving forward, coming out of camp, going into this upcoming season, I know that you're currently working with SI. Do you have any stories that you can kind of give us a hint at that you're possibly working on, or are there any interesting storylines that we should be aware of right now?
Guys, the most interesting storyline right now is Joe Burrow's microwave. But
facts.
I won't be writing about that. I think James is going to put something out about that later. But the biggest storyline to me and the biggest thing that I'm paying attention to, you guys know how I am. I think football is won in the trenches. I think that's one of the most important positions on the field outside of the quarterback. And so I'm paying heavy attention to that. And that is what my article will be on later this week, is assessing the offensive line, seeing if they're able to change and fix the issues from last year and move forward and hopefully keep Joe Burrow upright, because even though he says he likes to get hit, I think Joe Burrow has personally put on more muscle mass this season. Still, if you're on your behind 70 times in a season, that's a lot of wear and tear on your quarterback's body that you just don't want. So I am really focusing in on whether or not they're able to fix their issues, whether or not everybody on the offensive line understands what's being asked of them, and how fast they play is the biggest thing. They've got to play fast, and with a quarterback like Joe Burrow, a guy who likes to extend plays, these guys have to fight a lot longer than if they were blocking for Daniel Jones, for example. It's a totally different game. So they're having to hold their blocks a lot longer, play through the whistle, and it's those extra few seconds added up can do a lot of wear and tear on your body. So
yeah, for sure.
You got to be ready to block for a guy.
And that's why you need that microwave. You need cupcakes and crackers. We intertwine the two and magic. That's where the magic happens. Ace, did you have a follow-up for? I don't even know how you follow up the microwave. How did we just
There's no way to follow up the microwave at all. There's no way.
I'm intrigued.
It's not possible. It's not possible. Well, Elise, we want to thank you for your time. Please let everyone know where they can find your stuff.
Absolutely. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, Elise Jesse TV, and I put all my stuff out there, and then I'm on AllBengals.com.
All right. Well, we thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, we want to thank Elise Jesse for coming on to the shows. And was there anything that she said that you wanted to discuss? For me, it was kind of the Lyle Collins thing kind of stood out as far as him being kind of the new leader of the offensive line. Was there anything that you had to take away from there?
I thought the Pac-Man comment was gold. Like, you know, I was just telling you backstage that, man, I would make a quote off of it, but I don't want Pac-Man like trying to go at least. But that was gold because like Pac-Man was not playing around with it at all. This is my one takeaway. A lot of times in society right now, we like to preface like stuff with saying, "Oh, a woman did this" or "A woman did that." How about this person that is really good at what she does, just, you know, behind the scenes on that? She just came from practice. It's like 90 degrees outside, asking the hard questions, doing a lot of stuff that people talk about at their homes that they never really do. She's won awards for like what she's done, and she's still out there grinding it. And not to go into her personal life, like still has obligations to her home and stuff too. So I just thought that was really, really incredible, like watching all of that transpire. So I know a lot of people probably like, she's in the car or whatever, because she had told us a time and she held, you know, she stood 10 toes on that, 10 toes on that. And I thought she could have easily rescheduled. And I just thought that was very admirable. And I really thank her for that, because it was really cool to see her, I guess, in the car or whatever. But at the end of the day, I was like, there's a lot going on, I could tell. But she went right through it, and she's been doing this for so long, and she's a pro's pro. So that was my biggest takeaway.
No, for sure. Definitely a pro's pro. Let's get to the chicken wing pros, and we're going to slide it to our other sponsor of the show, Midwest Best Barbecue, where they'll talk about their Uno wings.
They tell me that the Uno wings will make you do the gritty. The Uno wings will make you do the gritty. Uno wings, come and get them Uno wings, who they gonna beat them Uno wings, MB's got you with them Uno wings, they tell me that the Uno wings will make you do the gritty. The Uno wings will make you do the gritty.
Yes, sir. Shout out to Midwest Best Barbecue, located in Loveland, 669 Justice Court. Make sure you get you some Uno wings. Make sure you get all of that. We appreciate our local sponsors, and we are looking for other sponsors within the city of Cincinnati. So if you are looking to work with us, follow the Wincinnati Pod on Twitter, the Wincy Pod on Twitter. We appreciate that. But moving forward, Zim, let's talk about the top 100 and which Bengals players essentially we think will make that list. I'll start off with saying I think that Joey B, Jamar Chase are locks. There's no way that those guys aren't going to be on there. I think Trey Hendrickson probably makes it. He was on it last season, so he followed up, 2 back-to-back seasons. I think he's on there. The fourth one, that's where I'm kind of struggling to see who else would make that list. So I would probably say if I have to add another one to that list, I probably would go with Jesse Bates. I feel like Jesse Bates.
Why do you think it's only 4? They already said it's only going to be 4?
No, they haven't announced how many will be there. This is just our thoughts on who will actually make it. I'm not aware of if they've announced it yet. I don't think they have, because people would have probably been out commenting on it.
I'm going to give you mine, but let me ask you this. Where do you think Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase land on the list number-wise, if you had to predict?
I think in the top 20. I think they're in that top 20.
No, I'm saying, give me a number, though. You think Joe Burrow is going to be number 10?
I'm not sure. I think Joe's probably higher. slightly higher. I think Joe's probably in the top 10, probably number 10 if I had to give a stab at it. I think Jamar Chase is at 15.
You know the crazy thing about it, I ask this question right now because think about this. If you had an NFL draft today at their age, their projection and everything like that, neither one of them will go outside of the top 6 or 7, right? Like Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, like that's your franchise right there. Like you go change your whole life, right? So when the list comes out and they're not in the top 10, I'll be upset because it's not real. If you go to fantasy football or anything like right now, you're drafting Jamar Chase, the second wide receiver off the board if you just value Devontae Adams or Cooper Kupp, right? Jamar Chase is the next pick. I don't care who you think is better or whatever. That's who you're drafting in the fantasy football world. I think if I'm the bank, I think that the Bengals should get Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow. I think Awuzie would be a person be fringe 100, 99, 98, only because of the one really, really good year. DJ Reader has to be. Like, if players are writing this down, he's already like he's top nose in the game. Like, he's got to be in the 80s. Like, to be and that's being fair. What he is to our team is more valuable than that, but in the 80s. Bates, I think, is just a name that everybody's grown accustomed to, and it won't be a representation of his play from the previous year. So I agree, Bates will be there. Mike Hilton is another guy that I think if players are talking. And I know Ryan was telling me backstage that players are just asked to write down 20 names or something on a sheet of paper or whatever. I can see how might not get in there like that. But if we're talking about consistency in this league with the Steelers and then now doing it with the Bengals, yeah, I would think you would put him in there too. Guys like Logan Wilson, I think they wouldn't get it. And that's kind of fair. I wouldn't argue with that. T. Higgins is the other one I didn't say. And then also Trey Hendrickson.
I think, like Diddy said, I don't know how I forgot about Mixon. I think Mixon makes it just because he had like however many touchdowns he had. I think Mixon is definitely making it.
Hold on. But Tyler Boyd, too. You don't think Tyler Boyd top 100?
I think if T's not making it, I don't think TB is. I think they'll be on, like you said, the honorable mention that could have made it. I think both of them will be there on that aspect.
I want to make it clear to people that say, well, how is Logan Wilson and like that's a big name that I think a Bengals fan will be like, why isn't that guy on the list? But you got to think they're going to look at like statistical merit, and then they're also going, and you got to think he missed 5-6 weeks, and then they're also going to look at like what have you done prior, and this is how we get to our 100. That's not a name that's spoken all the time. He's very important for the Bengals team. On the level of importance, I think Logan Wilson is more important at this juncture right now than Jesse Bates, in my opinion, right? But the NFL players don't see it as they don't frame it up that way. So that's just
facts. Well, we want to let you guys know that we are going to be back on Thursday, but before Thursday, please be sure to make sure that you're subscribed to the channel, the Wincinnati Podcast. We appreciate that because there are several shows on here, and there will be a big one coming tomorrow with the Bengals Pulse. They'll be having Jeff Hobson on. So please be sure to check out that and subscribe to that channel and share this with all of your Bengals fans, the Wincinnati Podcast, because that helps them find this channel. And please like that video and hit that comment button. We'd love to hear from you guys. We love to hear from you on all of the videos. So you will not just be hearing from me and Zim on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7:30 p.m., but you will be hearing from the Bengals Post. You'll also be hearing from Eric with the 513, and you'll also be hearing from Garrett as well with the new Wincy. So please be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn those subscriptions on, that alert bell on, because that will allow you to know when all of those shows go live. We appreciate you guys, and thank you for listening to the Wincinnati Podcast.
Wincinnati. Yes, sir. Hello, world. We got a special show, as always. TJ Houshmandzada, Jimmy Chase, Coach Jimmy Burrow. Time to be a Bengals
How do you balance being a professional athlete and family obligation? These are top 5 Bengals of all time.
All time? Yeah. Shock the world.